The dust on Keswick 7 never settled. It hung in the air like a brown fog, making every breath taste like metal and regret. Commander Scylla stepped off the transport ship, her 4 eyes adjusting to the dim light of the mining colony. Her silver scales caught what little sunlight penetrated the atmosphere, making her look like a piece of the sky had fallen to this miserable rock. She hated inspections, but the Vryn Confederacy demanded regular checks on their labor colonies, and as a decorated officer, Scylla had drawn the assignment. Around her, workers from a dozen different species hauled equipment, their bodies bent under the weight of Vryn rule. They didn't look at her. No one ever looked directly at a Vryn commander. "The deep tunnels are this way, Commander," her guard captain said, gesturing toward a massive opening in the rock face. "Production has increased by 12% this quarter." Scylla nodded, not really caring about percentages. She just wanted this inspection finished so she could return to her ship and forget this place existed. They descended into the mines. The temperature dropped with every step, and the air grew thick with moisture and the smell of unwashed bodies. Lights flickered along the tunnel walls, casting dancing shadows that made the workers look like ghosts. Scylla's boots splashed through puddles of chemical runoff, staining them colors that would take hours to clean. 3 levels down, the tunnel opened into a large chamber where dozens of workers chipped away at a massive vein of blue crystal. This was what the Vryn came to Keswick 7 for. These crystals powered their ships, their weapons, their entire civilization, and these workers bled to pull them from the ground. Scylla was examining a crystal sample when the ground moved. It wasn't much at first, just a tremor, like a giant had shifted in its sleep. But Scylla had been a soldier long enough to recognize danger. She turned toward the exit, just as the ceiling screamed. The sound was horrible. Rock grinding against rock. Support beams snapping like bones. Workers scattered in every direction, but there was nowhere to run. The tunnel entrance collapsed in an explosion of dust and debris. Scylla felt something massive hit her from behind, and the world went dark. When she opened her eyes, she couldn't see. Dust filled the air so thick it was like drowning in powder. Her right leg burned with pain, and when she tried to move it, agony shot through her body. Something heavy pinned her lower body to the ground. Around her, she heard screaming, then crying, then worst of all, silence, as people realized screaming wouldn't save them. "Is anyone alive?" a voice called out, in broken Vryn standard. The accent was strange, flattening the vowels in a way Scylla had never heard. "Here," Scylla managed to say, though her voice came out as a whisper. A light appeared through the dust. Not an electric light, but something makeshift. As it came closer, Scylla saw it was a chemical stick, the kind workers used in emergencies. Behind it was a face she didn't recognize at first. 2 eyes instead of 4. Skin that was brown instead of scaled. A human. "Don't move," the human said, kneeling beside her. "You're pinned under a support beam." "How many fingers am I holding up?" Scylla focused. 3. "Good, means your brain isn't scrambled. I'm Marcus. Can you feel your legs?" "My right leg hurts." "That's actually good news. Means it's not severed." Marcus looked around, his face grim. "Stay calm, Commander. I'm going to check on the others, then I'll come back for you." Scylla wanted to order him to help her first. She was a Vryn commander. These workers existed to serve her species. But something in Marcus's eyes stopped her. They weren't the eyes of a servant. They were the eyes of someone who had already decided what needed to be done and wouldn't be argued with. She watched him move through the darkness, that small light bobbing from person to person. He checked each survivor, speaking in calm tones, even when Scylla could see that some were beyond help. He closed the eyes of the dead with a gentleness that surprised her. Vryn didn't waste time on the dead. There were 7 survivors besides Silith. All workers, all terrified. Marcus returned to her after checking everyone. "Okay, Commander. Here's our situation. The main tunnel is completely blocked. We have maybe 18 hours of air, if we're lucky and don't panic. Water is dripping from somewhere, so we won't die of thirst. But you're hurt bad, and we need to get you free before shock sets in." "It weighs. I'm not going to move it. I'm going to lever it." Marcus was already looking around, picking up pieces of broken equipment. "Basic physics. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I can move the world. Or at least one support beam." Over the next hour, Silith watched this human do the impossible. He found a metal pole from a broken cart and a chunk of rock to use as a fulcrum. He recruited 2 other workers to help him, explaining the plan in simple terms that made them feel capable instead of scared. Together, they lifted the beam just enough for Marcus to drag Silith free. The pain almost made her pass out, but Marcus's voice kept her conscious. "Stay with me, Commander. I know it hurts, but I need you awake to tell me if you feel numb anywhere." He examined her leg with hands that were surprisingly gentle for someone who spent their days breaking rocks. "It's broken, but the bone didn't pierce the skin. I can splint it with what we have." "You have medical training?" Silith asked through gritted teeth. "I have YouTube training," Marcus said, which meant nothing to Silith. "I watched a lot of videos before they arrested me and shipped me here. Figured knowledge might keep me alive someday. Turns out I was right." He splinted her leg using broken tool handles and strips torn from his own shirt. It wasn't pretty, but it held. Then he moved on to the next crisis. Always calm, always thinking 3 steps ahead. The hours crawled by. The air grew stale and thin. People started to panic as the oxygen dropped. Marcus kept them busy with tasks, collecting water drips in containers, shoring up weak spots in their prison, sharing stories to keep their minds occupied. He rationed the air by having people take turns resting in the deepest corner where the coolest air settled. He treated injuries with materials that shouldn't have worked, but did. He kept checking on Silith, making sure infection wasn't setting in. "Why are you doing this?" Silith asked him during one check. "I'm Vryn. My people enslaved yours," he replied. Marcus looked at her with those strange 2-eyed face. "You're a person who's hurt and scared and trapped in a mine. That's all that matters right now. We can worry about politics if we survive." At hour 16, Marcus discovered water seeping through a crack. But it wasn't just water. It was flooding. An underground reservoir had been breached by the collapse, and water was slowly filling their chamber. "We have to move," Marcus said. "There's a secondary tunnel I saw earlier. It might lead to another shaft." "I can't walk," Silith said. "I know." Marcus knelt down with his back to her. "Climb on. We're not leaving anyone behind." For the next 2 hours, Marcus carried Silith through flooded passages on his back. The water rose from their ankles to their knees to their waists. Other survivors helped each other, but Marcus bore Silith's weight alone, refusing to let anyone else take her. His breathing grew ragged. His steps became slower, but he never stopped. Finally, impossibly, they saw light ahead. Not their chemical sticks, but real light. Rescue teams had broken through from a parallel shaft. Strong hands pulled them up and out into air that tasted like heaven. Medical teams swarmed Silith immediately. She was loaded onto a stretcher, given oxygen, rushed toward the transport ships. Through the crowd, she looked back and saw Marcus collapse. Blood soaked through his shirt from injuries he'd never mentioned. He'd been hurt the whole time. As medics surrounded him too, Marcus opened his eyes and found her gaze across the chaos. He smiled. Actually smiled. "See," he said, though she could barely hear him. "Told you we'd make it." Then the crowd separated them, and Silith was loaded onto a ship bound for the medical stations in orbit. She tried to ask about Marcus, about the human who had saved her, but the medics sedated her for treatment. When she woke 3 days later in a pristine Vryn hospital, she asked about the other survivors. The nurse told her they'd all lived. The workers had been processed and reassigned to other facilities. Standard procedure. Silith asked about Marcus specifically, about the human from the mine. The nurse checked records and shrugged. The human labor files from Keswick 7 were corrupted in the disaster, Commander. Could be anywhere in the sector now. Is there a problem? Silith stared at the ceiling and lied. No problem. But she couldn't stop seeing those eyes. Couldn't stop hearing that calm voice in the darkness. Couldn't stop remembering that a human, a member of a species the Vryn called primitive, had shown more courage and compassion than anyone in her superior race. That memory would haunt her for years to come. 3 years changed everything, and nothing at all. Silith stood on the observation deck of the Vryn command ship Relentless, watching ships come and go from the military station below. Her new rank insignia felt heavy on her collar. High Commander. She controlled 3 entire sectors now, commanded fleets that could reduce planets to ash, and sat in meetings where the future of the Confederacy was decided. She should have been proud. Instead, she felt hollow. The nightmares had started 6 months after Keswick 7. Always the same, trapped in darkness, unable to breathe, while a calm voice told her everything would be okay. She would wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there, her heart's pounding in her chest. During the day, she performed her duties perfectly. No one questioned her loyalty. She enforced Vryn law, managed labor quotas, and maintained order across her territories. But at night, alone in her quarters, she stared at the ceiling and wondered what had happened to a human named Marcus. She had tried to find him. Carefully, using her increased security clearance, she had searched through worker registries and transfer records. But the Keswick 7 files were truly corrupted. The disaster had destroyed the main database, and backup systems had failed. Thousands of workers had been redistributed across Vryn space with minimal documentation. Finding one specific human was impossible. Commander, the briefing begins in 10 minutes, her aide announced over the intercom. Silith sighed and left the observation deck. Another briefing. Another discussion about labor efficiency and production quotas and maintaining control over inferior species. She had sat through hundreds of these meetings and never questioned them before Marcus. The briefing room was filled with high-ranking Vryn officers, their scales gleaming under the harsh lights. They discussed supply lines and patrol routes while data scrolled across wall screens. Silith only half listened until one word caught her attention. Human. The human resistance is becoming more coordinated, Intelligence Director Vosh was saying. We're seeing patterns that suggest leadership structure. They're no longer just random riots and work slowdowns. They're planning. Humans can't plan, another officer scoffed. They barely have the intelligence for basic tasks. Vosh's expression didn't change. That assumption may be dangerous, Commander. Our analysts have noticed something disturbing. Human problem-solving capabilities are statistically anomalous. When presented with novel challenges, they adapt faster than any species we've encountered. Silith leaned forward. Explain. Vosh brought up a chart on the main screen. We've been running comparative studies for decades. Humans score poorly on most standardized intelligence tests. Their technology was primitive when we conquered Earth. But in practical application, in real-world scenarios, they consistently outperform predictions. They improvise. They innovate. They refuse to accept failure, even when logically they should. Are you suggesting humans are a threat? The Fleet Admiral asked. I'm suggesting we don't fully understand them, Vosh said carefully, and that our current classification of them as a Class 3 labor species may be incomplete. Nonsense, the Admiral said. Humans are useful for manual labor because they're resilient. Nothing more. This meeting is over. But Silith stayed behind, as others filed out. The data you showed. I want full access. Vosh studied her with his 4 eyes. May I ask why, High Commander? I'm considering a research project. Understanding labor species psychology could improve productivity. The lie came easily now. That night, Silith read classified files she was never meant to see. Files that painted a very different picture of humanity than the official Vryn narrative. Humans had the fastest adaptation rate of any conquered species. Put them in any environment, and within a generation they found ways to survive. Their emotional bonding created loyalty structures that made them dangerous in groups. Their capacity for creative thinking meant they could weaponize anything, turn any situation to their advantage, given enough time. Most disturbing was a psychological analysis from the Vryn Science Directorate. It concluded that human compassion, their seemingly irrational tendency to help others even at personal cost, created social cohesion that was nearly impossible to break. Traditional divide-and-conquer strategies that worked on other species failed against humans because they kept forming alliances, kept helping each other, kept refusing to abandon their own. One analyst had written in the margins, if humans ever unified under competent leadership, they would be unstoppable. Recommend maintaining current suppression protocols indefinitely. Silith closed the file and sat in darkness. They were afraid. The mighty Vryn Confederacy was afraid of the species they called primitive. She thought about Marcus, carrying her through flooded tunnels. Marcus refusing to leave anyone behind. Marcus with injuries he never complained about, because others needed help more. The Vryn had conquered humanity and called it superiority, but they had never understood what they were really dealing with. Weeks passed. Silith became obsessed. She requested transfers of human labor reports from across her sectors, looking for any mention of Marcus. She found thousands of humans with similar stories. Humans who protected weaker workers. Humans who organized secret schools to teach children. Humans who sabotaged equipment in ways that looked like accidents, but always helped their fellow prisoners. She found anger she didn't know she had, at her people, at herself, at a civilization that called itself advanced, while crushing everything that actually mattered. Then one day, a report crossed her desk that made her stop breathing. Station Typhon 9 had experienced a labor riot. 300 humans had refused to work, demanding better conditions for sick workers. The station commander had prepared to execute the ringleaders as an example. But the situation was resolved through negotiation instead. A human mediator had talked to the Vryn administrators and found a compromise that avoided bloodshed. The report noted, the human mediator demonstrated unusual insight into Vryn psychology and administrative procedures. Subject had previous experience in mining operations on Keswick 7. Recommend monitoring for future incidents. Silith read the line 3 times. Keswick 7. Her hands trembled as she accessed the station's personnel files. The mediator was listed as Chen Marcus, human male, age 37, assigned to Industrial Processing Sector 7. It was him. It had to be him. She stood up so fast, her chair fell over. Her aide looked up in surprise as Silith began pulling up travel schedules and inspection rosters. Commander, is something wrong? I need to schedule an inspection, Silith said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Station Typhon 9, as soon as possible. That station? But there was just a report filed. The situation is resolved. I want to see it personally. Schedule it for next week. Her aide looked confused. High commanders didn't typically involve themselves in minor labor disputes at remote stations. But he didn't argue with her tone. Yes, Commander, I'll make the arrangements. That night, Silith couldn't sleep. She kept imagining the moment she would see Marcus again. Would he recognize her? Would he even remember the mine collapse? 3 years was a long time. And what would she say? Thank you for saving my life. I'm sorry my people enslave yours. I've spent 3 years searching for you because you made me question everything I was raised to believe. She didn't have answers. She only knew that one glance had stopped her cold in that report. The human who saved her was right there, on Station Typhon 9, just a few days' travel away. For the first time in 3 years, Silith felt something other than hollowness. She felt hope, and the dawning realization that finding Marcus again was going to change everything. The days until the inspection crawled by like years. Silith prepared, rehearsed what she might say, and tried to plan for every possibility. But deep down, she knew no amount of preparation would be enough, because she wasn't just looking for the human who saved her life. She was looking for the person who had saved her soul. And she had no idea what would happen when they met again. The transport ship that would take her to Typhon 9 was ready. Silith boarded it with her official escort, carrying the weight of her rank and the secret of her true purpose. Station Typhon 9 waited among the stars, and somewhere on that station, in the human residential sectors, Marcus Chen lived his life, unaware that the Vryn commander he once saved was coming to find him. Silith spent every hour of those 4 days wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. But she couldn't turn back. Not now. Not when she was so close. The human who saved her was right there, and Silith would find him, no matter what it cost. Station Typhon 9 looked like a metal flower blooming in space. Its 8 processing arms extended from a central hub, each one pulling rare elements from asteroid fields and refining them into materials the Vryn used across their empire. 20,000 workers lived and died here, most of them from conquered species who had no choice in the matter. Silith's transport docked at the central hub, and she was greeted by the station commander, a nervous Vryn named Kellic, who clearly didn't understand why a High Commander was visiting his facility. "Everything is in order, High Commander," Kellic said, his scales reflecting his anxiety with rapid color shifts. "The incident last month was resolved without violence. Production is back to normal levels." "I want to see everything," Silith said. "Full tour of all sectors, including residential areas." Kellic hesitated. "The residential areas? Those are just worker housing, mostly humans and trell laborers. Nothing of interest to someone of your rank. Then it should be a short visit. Shall we begin?" For 3 days, Silith toured the station. She watched humans work in processing plants where the heat was barely tolerable. She saw children in makeshift schools learning basic skills that would prepare them for a lifetime of labor. She walked through markets where workers traded their meager possessions for necessities the Vryn didn't provide. Every face she saw was not Marcus. Every human male she passed was too tall, too short, too young, too old. Doubt began creeping in. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe it was a different Chen. Maybe the universe was cruel enough to give her hope just to take it away. On the 4th day, Kellic said, "That completes the inspection, High Commander. Unless there's something specific you'd like to review." Silith felt desperation rising. She was running out of time, out of excuses to stay. "The human residential sector. I haven't toured that thoroughly. But we passed through it yesterday. I want to see the community spaces, where workers gather during off hours." Kellic looked confused, but led her to Residential Arm 6. This was where most human workers lived, in small compartments stacked like boxes in a warehouse. The corridors smelled of too many people in too little space, but they were cleaner than Silith expected. Humans had painted murals on the walls, turning gray metal into scenes of Earth landscapes most of them would never see again. They passed a medical clinic where a human doctor treated a child's broken arm. a food distribution center where workers shared a meal that looked more nutritious than standard rations. A small garden where somehow, impossibly, humans had coaxed vegetables to grow under artificial lights. "They're very resourceful," Kellic said with something like respect. "We give them almost nothing, and they create community anyway. It's actually impressive for a Class 3 species." Silith didn't respond. She was too busy searching every face, every corridor, every doorway. Then she saw it. A community gathering space with windows looking into a large room. People were inside, sitting in a circle. Children and adults, human and non-human. And at the front, using broken tools and scrap metal to demonstrate something on a makeshift table, was a man with his back to the window. Silith stopped walking. Her guard stopped with her, confused. The man was explaining something, his hands moving as he talked. The children were watching with fascination. He picked up a piece of pipe and a chunk of metal, showing how leverage worked, how you could move heavy objects with simple physics. Exactly like he'd done in a collapsed mine 3 years ago. The man turned to answer a child's question. His profile came into view. Brown skin, a scar on his left cheek that hadn't been there before. Hair a bit grayer, but unmistakably, impossibly, certainly him. Marcus Chen. Time stopped for Silith. Her hearts hammered so hard she thought they might burst through her chest. 3 years of searching, 3 years of wondering, and he was right there, 20 meters away, teaching children basic engineering, with the same calm patience he'd used to keep 8 people alive in darkness. She must have made a sound, because Marcus looked up. His eyes found hers through the window. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock, to something Silith couldn't quite read. He held her gaze for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then Marcus looked down at the children around him. His expression changed to protective fear. Not for himself, Silith realized. For them. He was afraid of what her presence might mean for these children. "High Commander, is something wrong?" Kellic asked. The question broke the moment. Silith forced herself to look away from Marcus. "No. Continue the tour." "But that's just a community education session. The humans teach their children basic." "I said continue the tour." Silith's voice came out harsher than she intended. She let Kellic lead her away, but she could feel Marcus's eyes on her back. Could feel the weight of that moment hanging between them like a bridge across 3 years. Her mind raced. She couldn't just walk in there. Her guards were watching. Kellic was watching. Security cameras were recording everything. If a high commander showed unusual interest in one specific human laborer, people would ask questions. Investigations would start, and Marcus would become a target. She had found him. After 3 years, she had found him, and she couldn't even speak to him. That night, Silith lay in her guest quarters on the station, staring at the ceiling. Her mind kept replaying that moment of eye contact. Marcus had been afraid. Afraid of her? Or afraid for the people around him? Did he think she was here to hurt him? To take revenge on the human who had seen a Vryn commander at her weakest? She had to make contact, had to find a way to talk to him privately. But how? The answer came to her near dawn. She called Kellic to her quarters. "The incident last month," she said. "The human mediator who resolved it. I want to interview him." Kellic blinked in surprise. "Interview him? May I ask why?" "The report said he showed unusual insight into Vryn psychology. I'm interested in how a human could understand our administrative procedures well enough to negotiate effectively. It could be useful for managing labor relations in other facilities." It was a reasonable excuse. Kellic couldn't argue without seeming to question her authority. "Of course, High Commander, I'll have him brought to the security interview rooms." "No," Silith said quickly. "I don't want this to seem like an interrogation. It might make him less willing to speak freely. Is there a private office I could use? Something less intimidating? Kellic arranged for her to use a small administrative office in the central hub. It was private, but monitored, like all rooms on the station. Cameras in the corners. Audio recording. Nothing that happened here would be truly secret. An hour later the door opened, and Marcus was escorted in by 2 guards. He looked older in person. The scars were more visible. His hands showed the wear of 3 years of hard labor. But his eyes were the same, still calm, still assessing everything around him. The guards pushed him into a chair, facing Silet's desk. "We'll be right outside, High Commander." "That won't be necessary. Wait at the end of the corridor." The guards hesitated. "Protocol requires—" "I'm a High Commander speaking with one unarmed human worker. I think I can manage. Wait at the corridor." They left, though they didn't look happy about it. The door closed. Silith and Marcus were alone, except for the cameras that watched everything. Marcus spoke first. "Hello, Commander." His voice, that same calm voice from the darkness. Silith felt something crack inside her chest. "You remember me," she said quietly. "Hard to forget someone whose leg you splinted in a collapsed mine." Marcus studied her carefully. "You look good. The leg healed well?" "Yes, thanks to your field medicine." Silence fell between them. So much to say, and no way to say it. The cameras were watching. The audio was recording. Every word would be analyzed. "Why are you here?" Marcus asked. "Did you come to kill me? To make sure I never tell anyone that a Vryn High Commander needed help from a human slave?" The words hurt more because they were reasonable. "No." "Then why?" Silith leaned forward, choosing her words carefully. "The report said you negotiated during the labor dispute, that you understood Vryn administrative psychology. How?" Marcus shrugged. "I pay attention. I watch how your people think, how they make decisions. You value efficiency over everything else, so I showed the administrators that violence would be less efficient than compromise, that dead workers can't meet quotas." "That's all?" "That's all." Marcus held her gaze. "Is that what you wanted to hear, Commander?" No. She wanted to tell him she'd searched for 3 years, wanted to thank him for saving her life and her soul, wanted to apologize for every human suffering under Vryn rule, wanted to ask him to help her make things right. But the cameras were watching. "I may have more questions," Silith said carefully, "about your insights into labor management. I'll be on the station for another 2 days." Understanding flickered in Marcus's eyes. He nodded slowly. "I'm available for additional interviews, Commander. Whatever you need." The emphasis on the last word was slight but deliberate. Whatever you need. He was telling her he understood. That despite everything, he would help her, if she was really here for the reason she hoped. "Good. That's all for now." Marcus stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Commander, that day in the mine, I told you we'd make it out alive. I'm glad I was right." Then he was gone, and Silith was alone with the cameras and the weight of decisions she hadn't made yet. She had found him. They had made contact. And now, everything depended on what happened next. Because Silith was beginning to realize that saving Marcus wasn't enough. Saving just him would be a betrayal of everything he'd taught her in that mine. You don't leave people behind. She looked up at the camera in the corner and smiled slightly. Let them watch. Let them wonder why a high commander was interested in human labor psychology. They had no idea what was really happening, and by the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The second interview happened 2 days later. Same office, same cameras. But this time, Silith had prepared. Marcus sat across from her, his expression neutral. To anyone watching the recording later, this would look like a routine follow-up interview. Nothing suspicious. "Tell me about the resistance," Silith said. Marcus didn't flinch. "What resistance?" The organized resistance, the one planning coordinated actions across multiple systems. Don't insult me by pretending it doesn't exist. A long pause. Marcus studied her face, looking for something. Why would I tell a Vryn High Commander anything about that? Because I'm not here to stop it. Silith leaned forward, keeping her voice low. I'm here to help. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Help. A Vryn wants to help humans. Forgive me if I find that hard to believe. You saved my life in that mine. You showed me what compassion looks like. What courage looks like. What it means to refuse to leave people behind. Silith's voice was barely a whisper now. You woke me up, Marcus, and I can't go back to sleep. Something changed in Marcus's expression. Even if I believed you, even if there was a resistance, what could you possibly do? You're one person. Your people control entire sectors. I have access to fleet movements, supply routes, intelligence reports. Things the resistance needs to coordinate effectively. Silith paused. And I have something more important. I'm a Vryn High Commander who's willing to defect. Do you know what that would mean for your cause? It would mean the Vryn aren't united, that even your own people can see the truth about what you've done to the galaxy. Marcus was listening now, really listening. But it would also make you the most wanted traitor in Confederacy space. They'd hunt you forever. I know. And you're willing to risk that? For people you were raised to consider inferior. Silith met his eyes. You risked your life for me, a member of the species that enslaved your entire planet. If you could do that, I can do this. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Less guarded. Okay, say I believe you. Say there is a resistance and I'm part of it. What exactly are you proposing? Get me a secure meeting with your leaders. Let me prove I'm serious. Then we plan an operation that shows the galaxy what's possible. Silith pulled out a datapad and slid it across the desk. To the cameras, it would look like interview notes. These are the guard rotation schedules for this station, the security protocols. Everything you'd need to take control if you wanted to. Marcus picked up the pad, his eyes scanning the information. His expression didn't change, but Silith saw his hands tighten slightly. This is real intelligence. Yes. You could be executed just for giving me this. I know. Marcus looked up at her. Why? Why now? You could have walked away 3 years ago. Could have forgotten the human who got lucky in a mine. Why risk everything? Because every day I enforce Vryn rule. I see you carrying me through flooded tunnels. I see you protecting those children yesterday. I see what we've lost in becoming superior. Silith's voice cracked slightly. I can't keep being the person who accepts this. Not anymore. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, his back to the cameras. When he spoke, his lips barely moved. There's a resistance meeting in 3 days. Maintenance Tunnel 7, Sublevel 4, 0200 hours. Come alone. If you bring guards or betray us, a lot of good people will die. I'll be there. And Commander, if this is a trick, if you're setting us up, I will spend whatever life I have left making sure you regret it. Silith believed him. It's not a trick. Marcus returned to his chair. In a normal voice, for the cameras, he said, I think that covers your questions about labor management, Commander. Is there anything else? No. You're dismissed. The next 3 days were the longest of Silith's life. She went through the motions of her inspection, knowing that everything was about to change. She was either about to join a resistance movement against her own species, or she was about to walk into a trap that would end with her death. Either way, there was no going back. On the night of the meeting, Silith told her guard she was retiring early and didn't want to be disturbed. She changed out of her uniform into plain clothes she'd acquired from station supplies. Without her rank insignia and military bearing, she could almost pass for a civilian Vryn. Almost. The maintenance tunnels were exactly where Marcus said they'd be. Silith descended through levels of the station most officers never saw, where the real work of keeping Typhon 9 running happened. Pipes and cables lined the walls. The air smelled of oil and ozone. At sublevel 4, in Tunnel 7, she found a door that shouldn't have been there. She knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times, the pattern Marcus had whispered during their interview. The door opened. A human woman with a scar across her face looked Silith up and down. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Come in." The room beyond was small, maybe 4 meters square. 12 people were crowded inside. Most were human, but Silith recognized a Trell and 2 members of other conquered species. They all stared at her with expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hatred. Marcus stood at the back. "Everyone, this is Commander Silith. She says she wants to help." "She's Vryn," a large human male said. "Why should we trust anything she says?" "Because she gave me this." Marcus held up the datapad with the security protocols. "Real intelligence, the kind that could get her killed." "Could be a trap," someone else muttered. "It could be," Marcus agreed. "That's why we're here, to find out." Silith faced them all, these people she'd been taught to see as inferior. "I won't ask you to trust me. Trust has to be earned. But I can give you information that will save lives. Fleet movements, supply schedules, security weaknesses. And when you're ready to move, I can give you something more important. I can be a Vryn High Commander who publicly defects and exposes what the Confederacy has done. What do you get out of this? A chance to stop being part of the problem. A chance to help fix what my people broke." Silith looked at Marcus. "A chance to honor the debt I owe to someone who showed me what real courage looks like." The room was silent. Then an older human man spoke up. "I'm Yao. I coordinate resistance cells across 4 sectors. If you're serious about helping, we have an immediate problem. There are 3,000 humans on a prison transport heading to the mining colony on Brekka 5. That colony has a 90% death rate. Those people won't survive a year." "When does the transport arrive?" Silith asked. 6 days. "Can you intercept it?" Yao shook his head. "We don't have ships that can match Vryn military escorts. We'd be destroyed before we got close." Silith thought quickly. "I can't redirect the transport. That would raise immediate suspicions. But I could arrange a systems failure at Brekka 5's orbital station. If the transport can't dock, it would have to divert to the nearest facility for repairs." "Which would be?" Marcus asked. "Station Typhon 9, this station." Understanding dawned on several faces. "And if they came here," the woman with the scar said slowly, "we'd have access to them during the repair delays." "You'd have a 12-hour window while the transport systems were checked," Silith confirmed. "What you did with that window would be up to you." Yao and Marcus exchanged glances. "This is risky," Yao said. "If we tried to free 3,000 prisoners on a Confederacy station, it would be chaos," Silith agreed. "But I can manufacture orders that would reduce guard presence during the repair window. And I can make sure emergency protocols route security to the wrong sectors when things go wrong." "When things go wrong," Marcus repeated. "Not if." "You're expecting this to be a disaster." "I'm expecting it to be a fight. People will get hurt. Some might die. But 3,000 humans would have a chance instead of a death sentence." The room erupted in debate. Some thought it was too dangerous. Others argued that opportunities like this never came along. The arguments went back and forth until Marcus raised his hand. "I think we're asking the wrong question," he said. "It's not whether this is risky. Everything we do is risky. The question is whether Commander Silith is serious. Whether she's really willing to commit treason against her own species to help us." "And how do we know that?" someone demanded. Marcus looked at Silith. "Because if this operation happens and fails, there's no way the Confederacy won't investigate. They'll trace everything back to her. She'll be exposed as a traitor whether we succeed or not. She's betting her entire life on us. If we do this, I'm all in. There's no going back for me, ever. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed that. Finally, Yao spoke. All right, we vote. Who's willing to try this operation? Hands went up. Not everyone, but enough. The decision was made. Over the next hour, they planned. Silith provided intelligence. Marcus and Yao contributed tactical knowledge. Others offered skills and resources. Slowly, impossibly, a plan came together. As the meeting broke up, Marcus pulled Silith aside. Are you sure about this? Once it starts, you can't change your mind. I've been sure since I saw you through that window teaching children. Silith smiled sadly. Maybe I've been sure since you carried me through flooded tunnels. I just needed 3 years to admit it. If this works, you'll be the most wanted traitor in Vryn space. I know. And if it fails, you'll be dead. I know that too. You're not doing this just because you feel guilty, are you? Because guilt is a terrible reason to commit treason. No, I'm doing it because I finally understand what you showed me in that mine. That some things matter more than rules or rank or species. That refusing to leave people behind is the only thing that makes us worth saving. Silith met his eyes. I'm doing it because it's right. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay then, let's save some lives. They shook hands, human and Vryn. Traitor and resistance fighter. Two people who shouldn't have trusted each other, but did anyway. The operation would begin in 5 days. Silith had that long to set everything in motion without raising suspicion. She had that long before everything changed, forever. And somewhere in Vryn Command, an intelligence officer named Jax was beginning to notice irregularities in High Commander Silith's recent activities, beginning to ask questions that would lead to dangerous answers. The clock was ticking. The prison transport arrived at Station Typhon 9 exactly on schedule. Silith watched from the command center as the massive ship docked at Processing Arm 3. Its holds full of 3,000 humans, bound for almost certain death on Brekka 5. Station Commander Kellic stood beside her, reviewing the repair orders. This is unusual, High Commander. The system's failure at Brekka 5 was quite sudden, almost suspicious. Equipment fails, Silith said calmly. That's why we have backup protocols. How long for the transport's inspection? 12 hours minimum. The manifest says we need to verify life support systems before they can continue to Brekka 5. Good. Keep me informed of any problems. But Silith knew the real problem was already in motion. In 6 hours, Marcus and his resistance cell would make their move. The prisoners would be offered a choice: stay on the transport and go to their deaths, or fight for freedom. Humans always fought. Silith had done everything she could. Security rotations were adjusted. Emergency protocols had been quietly altered. Supply depots were accidentally left unsecured. She had given the resistance every advantage possible, without making it obvious. Now she just had to wait and hope she hadn't sent people she cared about to their deaths. The first sign of trouble came 4 hours into the inspection. An alarm sounded in the processing arm. Report, Kellic demanded. Security breach in Cargo Bay 7. The transport prisoners somehow opened their holding cells. Guards are responding. Kellic looked confused. How did they open the cells? Those systems are isolated from prisoner access. Silith said nothing. She had made sure those systems were vulnerable. Made sure the security codes could be bypassed by someone who knew what they were doing. Someone like Marcus. Send additional security teams, Kellic ordered. Contain them before they reach the main corridors. But the security teams found their paths blocked by malfunctioning blast doors. Found their communication systems jammed by interference that shouldn't have been possible. Found themselves routed away from the actual fighting by emergency protocols that directed them to false alarms. Silith had sabotaged her own people. The weight of it sat in her chest like stone. On the monitors, she watched chaos spread through Processing Arm 3. 3,000 prisoners were pouring into the corridors, overwhelming the guards who'd expected them to be secured. The resistance fighters were arming them with weapons taken from storage depots that should have been locked. It was working. Against all odds, it was actually working. Then Kellic received a communication that made his scales go pale. "High Commander, we have a priority message from Vryn Intelligence Command. Commander Jax is requesting immediate connection." Silith's heart nearly stopped. Jax, her rival in intelligence, the officer who'd been suspicious of her activities. Put him through. Jax's face appeared on the main screen. His 4 eyes were cold. "High Commander Silith, what an interesting situation you have at Station Typhon 9. A prisoner uprising happening exactly when you're visiting, using security vulnerabilities that somehow appeared in the last few days. Rather convenient, wouldn't you say?" "I don't know what you're implying, Commander Jax." "I'm implying that you're a traitor, and I have proof." Jax sent data to the command center screens. "We've been monitoring your activities for weeks. The irregular security requests, the access to classified human resistance files, the communications with known insurgent sympathizers. Did you really think you could hide your treachery?" "High Commander, is this true?" Silith could lie, could try to talk her way out, but the evidence was there, and Jax wouldn't have contacted her unless he was certain. She made her choice. "Yes," Silith said quietly, "it's true." The command center erupted in shocked silence. Guards moved toward her, but Silith raised her hands. "I won't resist. But I need to know, Jax, how long have you known?" "Long enough to prepare. My fleet is 3 hours from Station Typhon 9. When we arrive, we will execute every human involved in this uprising. We will execute the prisoners on that transport. We will execute every resistance sympathizer on this station. And we will execute you, High Commander, publicly, as an example of what happens to traitors." 3 hours. Silith had 3 hours to save everyone, or watch them all die. "Arrest her," Kellic said to the guards. "Confine her to secure holding." As guards restrained her, Silith caught the eye of one of her aides, a young Vryn named Silas, who she'd trusted with small tasks. Silas looked devastated by the betrayal, but Silith had one last card to play. "Silas," she said as guards pulled her toward the door, "remember what I taught you. Always verify your enemy's position before committing to battle." It was a strange thing to say, meaningless to everyone except Silas, who Silith had secretly recruited 2 weeks ago, who understood that this was the signal to activate the final part of their plan. Silas moved to a console and began typing. Within seconds, alarms blared throughout the station. "What's happening?" Kellic demanded. "Reactor warning," Silas said, looking shocked. "We have a cascade failure building in the main power core. If it goes critical, the station will explode." It was a lie, but the false alarm would do 2 things. It would justify an evacuation, and it would force Kellic to choose between stopping the uprising and saving the station. "Begin emergency evacuation," Kellic ordered. "All personnel to escape craft, now." In the chaos that followed, Silith broke free from her guards. She'd been trained in combat since childhood, and these guards were security officers, not soldiers. She disabled them quickly and ran toward Processing Arm 3. She had to reach Marcus, had to warn him about Jax's fleet. The corridors were full of fleeing personnel. Silith pushed through them, ignoring shouts for her to stop. She reached Processing Arm 3 to find a full battle in progress. Human prisoners fought Vryn guards with improvised weapons and stolen rifles. Bodies lay in the corridors. Blood stained the walls. "Marcus!" Silith shouted over the sounds of combat. A human fighter pointed toward the transport ship. He went to the reactor control, said something about making the evacuation real. No. Silith ran toward the transport, her legs burning. She knew what Marcus was planning. He was going to actually destabilize the transport's reactor. make the threat real, so everyone would have to evacuate. It would buy time for the prisoners to escape. It would also kill him. Reactor cores required manual shutdown of safety systems. The radiation exposure would be lethal. She found him in the transport's engineering section, surrounded by burning conduits and radiation warnings. His face was already showing the effects of exposure. Blood leaked from his nose. "Marcus, stop!" He looked up at her, surprised. "Silith, you're supposed to be in custody." "So are you. What are you doing?" "Buying time. If the reactor goes critical, they'll have to evacuate. Your people, my people, everyone. It gives the prisoners a chance to get to the escape craft and scatter before Jax's fleet arrives. You'll die. The radiation exposure." "I know." Marcus continued working, his hands moving through the reactor controls. "But 3,000 people will live. It's basic math." Silith grabbed his arm. "You can't. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. Not again." "Why not? You saved me once. Let me return the favor." Marcus smiled weakly. "Besides, someone has to lead those people out there. They'll follow a Vryn High Commander who chose them over her own kind. I'm just one stubborn human who can't leave people behind." "Then I'll finish this. You leave. You don't know the transport systems. You can talk me through it." Marcus studied her face. "The radiation is already lethal. Both of us staying means both of us dying." "Then we both die. I'm not leaving you in here alone." They stared at each other while alarms blared and the reactor temperature climbed. Finally, Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. "You're as stubborn as I am. That's going to be a problem." "It already is. Now tell me what needs to be done." Working together, they manually disabled the reactor safeties. Marcus explained each step while Silith's hands did the work. Her training in engineering helped, but it was Marcus's knowledge of the transport-specific systems that made it possible. "Why?" Marcus asked as they worked. "Why did you come back for me? You could have escaped, could have gotten to a ship and fled before Jax arrived." "Because you showed me what matters in that mine. You refused to leave anyone behind. How could I leave you behind?" "That's different. You're a symbol of what the Resistance can achieve. And you're the person who saved my life, who saved my soul, who showed me what courage really means." Silith looked at him through the haze of radiation and smoke. "You're not just one human, Marcus. You're the reason I'm here. The reason any of this is happening." The reactor warning changed to critical. They had maybe 3 minutes before it exploded. "We need to go," Marcus said. "Now." They ran. Marcus was slower, the radiation sickness already affecting his coordination. Silith grabbed his arm and pulled him along, practically carrying him through the corridors. They burst out of the transport, just as the evacuation sirens reached maximum urgency. Escape craft were launching from every dock. The station was emptying. But Marcus collapsed. He couldn't go further. The radiation had done too much damage. Silith knelt beside him. "Don't you dare leave me now." "Not planning on it." Marcus coughed, blood staining his lips. "But I might need some help walking." Using strength she didn't know she had, Silith lifted Marcus and carried him toward the escape craft. She pushed through crowds of fleeing workers, ignored people trying to stop her, focused only on getting to safety. A small craft was still docked in Bay 7. Resistance fighters were loading the last prisoners aboard. Yao saw her coming and waved urgently. "Get in. We launch in 30 seconds. Silith stumbled up the ramp with Marcus. The craft was packed with humans, all of them staring at the Vryn High Commander, carrying one of their own. The craft launched just as the transport's reactor went critical. Through the viewports, they watched Station Typhon 9's processing arm 3 explode in a ball of fire. The station itself survived, but the transport was destroyed, along with any evidence of what had really happened. Is everyone out? Silith asked Yao. Most of them. We lost some in the fighting, but over 4,000 people are on escape craft heading to rendezvous points. Yao looked at Marcus, his expression grim. He needs a medical pod, now. They got Marcus into the craft's small medical facility. The equipment was basic, designed for emergency treatment only, but it stabilized him. The radiation damage was severe, but not immediately fatal. He would need months of treatment, but he would live. Silith stayed by his side as the craft jumped to hyperspace, leaving Vryn territory behind. Around her, humans celebrated their freedom. Children cried in relief. Families held each other. They had done it. Against every odd, they had freed thousands of people. Silith, Marcus's voice was weak but steady. Did we save them? Most of them. You saved them. We saved them. You and me. Team effort. Marcus managed a smile. Still can't believe you came back. 3 years, across all those star systems. One glance stopped me cold, Silith said quietly. The human who saved me was right there. How could I do anything else? Marcus reached for her hand. She took it. Human and Vryn, two people who should have been enemies, now bound together by choices that had changed everything. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now you heal. The Resistance has medical facilities in free space. Vryn technology that can treat radiation poisoning. I meant for you. You're a traitor to your own species now. They'll hunt you forever. I know. But I'm also free, for the first time in my life. Free to help build something better than what the Confederacy created. Silith looked around at the humans celebrating their liberation. Free to fight beside people who understand what really matters. It's going to be hard. Zax won't stop hunting us. The Confederacy will use this as propaganda against human resistance. Let them. We have something they don't. We have proof that even Vryn can choose compassion over conquest. That species don't have to be enemies. That's worth fighting for. Marcus squeezed her hand. Yeah, it is. Months would pass before Marcus recovered enough to fight again. In that time, Silith's defection became a rallying cry for the Resistance. The classified files she brought with her exposed Vryn fears and weaknesses. Other conquered species began joining the liberation movement. The war for freedom had truly begun. And for the first time in Vryn history, they weren't guaranteed to win. Because humanity had found allies. Had found Vryn, willing to fight against their own species for what was right. Had found that compassion and courage could overcome even the most powerful empire. 1 year after Station Typhon 9, Silith and Marcus stood together on the bridge of a Resistance flagship. Outside the viewport, a fleet of ships from a dozen species prepared for their largest coordinated strike yet. Ready? Silith asked. Marcus, fully recovered and now a Resistance commander himself, smiled. Always ready. You? Always. They had come a long way from a collapsed mine on Keswick 7. A long way from that moment, when a human chose to save a Vryn, despite every reason not to. A long way from that recognition through a window that changed everything. One glance had stopped her cold, but what followed had set them both free. And together, they would free the galaxy.